Hello, everybody, and best wishes for the holidays. Now, I'm really wishing I'd dressed up for today. Thank you for brightening my day, everyone. So let's start on this update with a couple of pieces of good news. The first of them is on this graph, and the good news is not the red and the orange lines. Those are Ontario, but the green and blue and purple lines at the bottom. And so that's British Columbia, Alberta, Manitoba. And what you can see is that all of those numbers have gone down, which tells you that the additional restrictions that have been put in place on closures and increasing social distancing in those provinces are having an effect. And you knew that was going to happen. And I know you know that, but it's worth a reminder because not everybody does. A journalist called me the other day from a large news organization saying, you know, how do you know that this social distancing and masking and closing things actually works? And I'm like, well, you remember Nova Scotia? How many cases do they have in Nova Scotia, right? So people are forgetting that the virus hasn't changed, the principles haven't changed, and this really is, until the vaccine works, about reducing contacts, maintaining social distancing, and that those things work. So, you know, I think that's really hopeful for British Columbia, where cases are at least stable and are probably going to start to go down. All of us are, I think, still really anxious about Ontario because the additional restrictions that have been implemented really don't make that much of a difference to the hotspots in Ontario, and we may well be looking at additional restrictions in January. Next slide. Second piece of good news, which you're going to hear more about from Sienna specifically, is about vaccines. So we're now tracking vaccine doses delivered across Canada, which is nice. And you can see 5,200 people vaccinated in Ontario last week. Essentially all of them long-term care staff, which is, I think, a really nice recognition of both the importance of long-term care and the risk in long-term care. And probably even better news for us worrying about implementing vaccination programs is that many more doses have been given, particularly in the UK. So the UK is now starting to report vaccination data Wednesday afternoons. So I don't have last week's data, but in the first week, they gave 137,000 doses of the Pfizer vaccine in the UK. And so far, all we've heard about is people with allergic reactions. If you look really carefully in vaccine programs, and we have been looking really carefully with COVID vaccines, about 1 in 10,000 people get some sort of significant allergic reactions. Generally, they're not dangerous, they're pretty easily manageable. They usually occur as all the ones that I've heard about so far in people who already have allergic reactions to something. So both of the ones reported from the UK were in people with sufficiently severe allergic reactions that they always carry their EpiPen with them, okay? So usually they're manageable. We were hoping that there weren't going to be as many allergic reactions with these RNA vaccines because they don't have very many excipients. And we can still hope that the Moderna one, which is a different formulation, although it has a lot of similar components, might have fewer allergic reactions. But you know, so far so good. And probably by the first week in January, we'll get some kind of report about other less common adverse events from the UK that will be very helpful in informing us about whether there are other adverse events. As far as the rollout goes, there are more doses of Pfizer vaccine coming on Monday. There are now going to be apparently about 800,000 doses of Pfizer vaccine coming in January. And as soon as the Moderna vaccine is approved, then we'll start the clock. It'll probably be 3 or 4 days from approval to when it arrives in the country. and another 3 or 4 days before we can start getting it into the arms of residents in long-term care. So it's intended for residents in long-term care and high-risk remote and northern communities for starters. So it will be a little bit of a panic because we can't write the consent forms until we have the product monograph from Health Canada. But it should be coming soon. And, you know, it's irritating that it's taking Health Canada so long, but this is what we pay them for, to be very, very careful and to go through all the data and to be absolutely sure about things. So patience is a virtue in this circumstance. Last slide. Okay, the other news of the week, okay, is new and scary virus variants. And there's 2 of them that people are watching. You know, as usual, virologists are uncreative and unhelpful in their naming of things. So in the UK, it's B.1.1.7, and in South Africa, it's 501.V2. You know, somebody's Excel sheet, right, somewhere. And the reason we're worried about these particular, there's been a fair amount of variation in viruses. All RNA viruses change fairly quickly, but they haven't been directional, and they come and they've gone, and it really hasn't looked like anything's happening. And I think that made us a little bit casual about worrying about what we knew was going to happen, which was that this virus is going to evolve, because that's what coronaviruses do. And so these 2 strains are worrisome for a series of reasons. The first is that they have multiple mutations in the RNA that change the spike protein. The spike protein is the outer surface. It's what everybody's using in vaccines, and it's what we respond to antigenically. So changes in that change your antibody response, and that's of concern. And there's a whole cluster of them together that suggests that this is directional, and if viruses can be purposeful, okay, as opposed to just random mutations. The second thing that people are worried about is there's one particular mutation called N501Y. So that's position 501 in the spike protein, and it changes from the amino acid that is coded N to the amino acid that's coded Y. And that increases the binding to some receptors in human airways. And that makes people worried that these virus strains are going to be more transmissible. And in fact, the reason that the UK detected their strain was because they had one area in the UK where they went into lockdown and the cases didn't decrease. And so they went looking for, why did these cases not decrease? And one of the hypotheses is this new strain, which is more transmissible, it's harder to control transmission. And it's that finding that has caused us to close our borders to people from the UK and a bunch of the European Union to do the same thing, which honestly is a little bit unfair, because if this happened in Canada, we wouldn't even have noticed it because our sequencing is not good enough to do it. So, you know, when you're really good at detecting threats, one of the recognized problems is that then people, you know, get back at you by closing borders and things. So we're also going to need to be worried about that. So we don't know whether they cause more severe disease. Looks like not. We don't know they spread more easily, but that's what everyone's worried about. And then the third important question when we see these changes is the vaccine going to work? Because the vaccine is based on the spike protein and on us making antibodies to it. And the answer is almost certainly the vaccine will be fine. But to get past the almost certainly, people need about probably 3 weeks to do testing to make sure it's still going to be okay. The slightly good news after that is with mRNA vaccines, you can actually change the structure of the spike protein really quickly. So even if we have to change, we'll lose about a month in the vaccine. It's not like we'll have to go right back to the beginning and spend another 9 months making it. It'll be a relatively short-term loss. So, you know, I think the answer is, it was nice when the virus wasn't changing. We can be grateful that we had that small thing, but it's not surprising that this is happening. It's just something that we're going to have to watch out and be careful for and get used to seeing in surveillance. So with that, the the best of the holidays to everyone. Stay safe over the holidays. Take care of yourselves. Try to enjoy yourselves on Zoom or whatever your visual IT piece of choice is for seeing your family and friends. Thanks, everybody. Take care.